So, the topic that we're going to be discussing is melatonin. And melatonin, as you mentioned earlier, has been pigeonholed into this idea of just simply being about sleep.
Yeah.
And I think today we're going to try to bust that myth a little bit, go beyond the idea of just sleep. We're going to talk about the science of melatonin, what its roles are within the body, the mitochondrial role, something that we've mentioned in the past. And we want to dig into a little bit on the spiritual side and not necessarily go off into woo woo land completely, but certainly allow for there to be something a little bit greater than just the basics being presented in today's conversation.
But then there wasn't really the reciprocal talk on the side of melatonin and darkness deficiency, that we don't only have a sunlight deficiency, we have a deficiency of darkness. And in fact, it's not just a deficiency of darkness, we have an excess of artificial light at night, which has been referred to as ALAN. So it's disturbing ecosystems. I even call it the most societally accepted endocrine disruptor, because we think light at night is a good thing, right? We know plastics are bad, we know heavy metals are bad, but we don't know that artificial light at night is bad. We mostly think, oh, well, it disrupts our sleep, but we don't look at the further implications of that and what that actually means. We have the cellular production of melatonin. So that again can happen in the skin, it can happen in the gut. In fact, the gut is one of the primary repositories of melatonin. We make something on the order of 100 to 400 times the amount of melatonin from the pineal gland in the gut. And that's not in response to darkness, that's a little bit different. And what we see is that it may be playing a role in modulation of the gut microbiome.
Do you know if melatonin production is proportional to the number or not necessarily the number of mitochondria, although that's usually typically aligned with the amount of metabolic activity that's going on in that cell type, versus muscle versus fat cell as an example. The reason why I ask is because melatonin is such a potent antioxidant and it's used by your mitochondria as a potent antioxidant to protect against free radical damage and reactive oxygen species damage. And so, that the production locally of melatonin, one of the purposes, not the only, but one of the purposes is within the mitochondria, because it's one of only three antioxidants. People talk about vitamin C and vitamin E, and those are great as antioxidants for the cell, but they don't get into the mitochondria. There's only, superoxide dismutase, melatonin, and glutathione that get into the mitochondria directly and can actually, quench those free radicals and reactive oxygen species locally in the mitochondria. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm remembering this and I might be misremembering it, but I believe that melatonin and the enzymes for making melatonin are actually present inside the mitochondria so that mitochondria can actually synthesize melatonin themselves if necessary.
That's correct. That's correct. And everything you said is true, that melatonin is very unique to the mitochondria. And part of the reason for that is because of its amphiphilic nature. And what that means is that melatonin has a very unique chemical structure in that it can flex to being water soluble, which is why it's found in the watery compartments of the body, like the blood and the urine. And it can also be fat soluble. So the mitochondria, which has it has this bilayer lipid membrane, right? There has been no scientific evidence that I have seen where scientists have set out, or even clinicians have set out prospectively to look at whether or not the body stops making melatonin when you take melatonin supplementation. There have been, I believe, at least 4 different clinical trials where they set out to look at that and have not found that. And I think it's because melatonin is not a true hormone. It's not working in the same negative biofeedback loop that something like testosterone would. Now, that said, it also depends on the dose of melatonin and what
Mhm.
you're actually taking, right? Because I think what happens in our society is it's the shiny object syndrome, SOS. It's kind of like, if a little is good, let me
More
just
is
take
better,
a large
yeah.
amount. So that's the other hack is I don't think people realize is it's the darkness deficiency for sure, making sure you have proper darkness. You're wearing your blue light blocking glasses at night if you are in full spectrum light. But then also getting that bright morning light is really important for setting the stage for the next night of sleep.
This is a thing that we've come back to a few times is the cyclic nature of the human life, right? Like life is happens in cycles. We have day and night cycle, we have seasonality that our body kind of follows, and when we live in harmony with that cyclic nature of how Mother Nature is providing for us, right? If you can work to improve your melatonin production, ensure that you have this long standing anti inflammatory, immune regulating effect of melatonin throughout your life as long as possible, you're going to engage these recovery processes more readily.